Good, good afternoon, everybody. This is Marty from Dogs Blog. In the noontime report of the Frank Carson et al. Trial on October 24th, 2018. I was late getting to court. I had a doctor's appointment this morning. I got there around 10:05. Court was already in session. They were doing a 402 hearing. Remember, that's an evidentiary hearing with a lady from that is a dog handler that on the dogs that were cadaver dogs that were sent to the properties on the day of the search warrants. I didn't hear a large part of the testimony as I got there late, as I said. But when I walked in, Marlissa Ferrer was asking her if a body was removed from the property, would the dog alerted, Rio was the name of the dog, would the dog would have alerted on that property if there was a body that had been removed. She says if there's no fluids, no, the dog would not alert. If there was fluids present, yes. There was really, that's all she could say, and really it's what I understand was the whole testimony involved was that the dogs did not alert on the property, so they, she's saying if there's fluids, there was any type of fluids, any type of blood or body fluids of any type, the dog would have alerted. The dogs were used on 9th Street. The dogs were used at Pop and Cork and several other locations, my understanding, over on Main Street and such like that too. Marlissa Ferrer was also asking questions if the dog could hit in a plowed field, and she said that's all depending on the amount of fluid and the depth and etc., things like that. But she's not an expert in that type of field, so she really doesn't know. All she knows is what the dog will or will not do. Attorney Hans asked her, the longer that the body is in a burial site, the more the body will release the cells that are detected by the dogs. And she did say the longer that the body was down in a grave, say a shallow grave or something, the more body fluids that would be escaped into the surrounding areas of that grave. At this point, the judge called a break, and when we came back at 11 o'clock, the jury came in at 11:03. This witness was not finished at this time. Judge was on the bench again at 11:06. The jury was up, and they started hearing from Mr. Harmer, the DNA expert from yesterday, to want to finish his testimony. And really all he could say, I'm summing it up, I'm going to do a summary here, is that the only thing that relates to anybody involved, let me rephrase that because that's not true. Corey Kaufman is the only contributor that was on any DNA on anything from the clothes, meaning the shirt, the jacket, or the boots. The only thing that he showed was on the carabiner. Nobody else, and as Percy Martinez asked him, no other person in this courtroom, and talking about the entire courtroom, could be a possible contributor of any samples, even if they were minor samples, what they call some Leos and some dropouts and some other things, which I don't know the exact definitions of, but that's the terms they were using. And there was nobody in the courtroom that could be a contributor to any other sample that he knows of. Marlissa Ferreira did ask him if he could, here we go again, test, because he talked about the shirt. There was only a partial shirt there. The bottom of the shirt was gone, and she was asking him if he could test the DNA on a piece of shirt that's not there. I don't know why she asked that question. Questions like that, she does it all the time. Of course you can't test a piece of clothing that does not exist. She asked him if, Marlissa Ferrer asked him if there was, in regards to Daljeet Atwal, instant objection, long sidebar. a very animated sidebar, and people were not happy up at that sidebar. Looked like all the attorneys were getting pretty aggravated. When she came back, they talked about, when they came back from sidebar, they talked about all three defendants. They had received buccal samples, which is a cheek swab. He gave technical information on the markers and all that stuff. It was a long list of stuff for each sample. And the bullet he talked about, there was 3 tests that run, but he obtained samples only in 2 of those tests, results on 2 of those tests. There was 4 profiles derived from the bullet. The swab that was done by DOJ and sent to Siri Lab was an extraction that he did his own testing on the bullet. He did not use their sample. No results found. And the 2 areas of the bullet, they divided up into 20 areas. There was no results found on 2 of those areas. Each of the 20 areas had what he called dropout samples, which are very weak samples. They don't give enough results to read. And he didn't have enough information to develop a profile. The minimum threshold of all 20 sites, so no minor contributors were able to. He wasn't able to rule out. Was able to rule out all the contributors except Corey Kaufman. What does that mean? It means that there was no DNA samples of any of the defendants. Of the 9 samples he had, all the defendants, there was no samples, no results that came back with any of those defendants. There was only results that came back to confirm Corey Kaufman. He also talked about the swab in the bullet from the DOJ. There were 17 of 20 sites on that bullet that had no sample. There was no match for even a minor contributor on that bullet. The next swab had 12 sites, and again, no minor contributor. Marlissa Ferrara had no more questions. Percy Martinez started his cross, and this is actually re-cross or something. On sample number 7-2, which was a spent bullet, the sample was the only possible on that sample bullet was Corey Kaufman. But he said that was confirmed. That could be from just throwing the bullet in the bag with the clothes and bones. He asked him about CODIS. That's a database of DNA profiles that's maintained by the FBI. Any convicted felon that goes to prison has to submit a sample to that database. And he has to be requested by the law. He is not a law enforcement officer, so he has to be requested by the law enforcement agency to be able to submit it to CODIS for a check of anybody in the database. That request was never submitted by Stanislaus County to check for anybody else that might be in the system on DNA. He also noted that Stanislaus County was aware of his results, and he still never received results of no defendant contributed to any samples, and he still was not requested to submit it to CODIS for a DNA match in the system. Percy Martinez continued on, and the expert said he did advise there was an unknown major contributor on the carabiner. In fact, there was 2 major contributors on the carabiner and the key ring. But those are unknown contributors. They don't match anybody, including Corey Kaufman. Corey Kaufman was on that carabiner and the keys, but 2 other major contributors were also on that, but nobody else was tested, and nor was it run through the database. Percy asked him if all defendants, and he asked them one by one, each defendant one by one, but they were not even a minor contributor. He said, as an expert, Are all three defendants excluded as any type of contributors in regards to the carabiner and any of this evidence? He said, yes, they are. And he said Corey Kaufman is a minor contributor in the carabiner. He talked about blood that outlasts DNA in the environment. So in the environment, say in Mariposa County, where you have hot weather, cold weather, rain, dirt, other elements there, foliage or whatever it is, blood outlimits DNA in the environment. So the bullet was embedded in dirt, but still found DNA on the bullet. Even though it was embedded in dirt, but there was no blood on the bullet. And again, he said any contributor in the courtroom can be eliminated. He used filter paper to swab both boots in the toe area. He reached in to the inside of the boot, swabbed the inner boot with some filter paper. He did not recall if there was any dirt in the boots, but not necessarily. He didn't note it if there was there. He said that would not be an area of concern of his. Percy Martinez showed him evidence in number 551A, which is the box with the boots in it. He was looking at, he did open it up, looked at the left boots, and he said there was no blood showing noted in the boot. There was no holes in the toe area to expose to the elements. He said in that toe area would be protected from the elements in that boot. And there was no holes in the top of the boot, no holes in the sole of the boot. There was no holes that would expose it to the elements. He did the same thing with the left boot. So he checked both boots. He did not recall if the liners were in the boots when he received them. And there are stains on the liners, there are stains on the boots, but all of it tests negative for blood. Again, the interior, they talked about the interior of the boot not exposed to elements, as protected by the outside of the boot in the enclosed area. Again, saw stains, but all tested negative for blood. He was asked if he was looking for dirt in or about the boot, and he said he did not look for dirt. That is not his area of specialty. He's only looking for blood. When he examined the T-shirt, he did see some sand in the packaging, and that sand he noticed was repackaged with the shirt. He saw some stains in the upper part of the front of the shirt, so basically it was on the shoulders and in the chest area. He found a stain on the shoulder and chest. He did a presumptive test, which was positive for blood on the top of the shirt, but it was negative for human blood. So it could have been an animal or something left in blood remains on some remnants on the remains. So that's all we had for the morning session. Tom's report will be up tonight. He has a more thorough report on the hearing on the dogs. We'll be back at 6 o'clock tonight with the podcast.